The crystalline spires of Lyra VII's floating capital glimmered in the lavender light of its twin suns, a breathtaking display of architectural harmony that belied the rigid society contained within. To most outsiders, the planet was a mysterious enigma, renowned across the galaxy for its advanced spiritual technology and closed social structure that valued inner harmony and ancient rituals above all else. The atmosphere in the capital was solemn, almost suffocating to visitors unaccustomed to the constant weight of tradition and ceremony. Into this rarefied environment strode Captain Jack's Riptide, Riley, his standard-issue Terran combat armor clanking loudly against the resonant crystal floors of the Harmony Hall's antechamber. The sound echoed obscenely in the otherwise silent space, drawing disapproving glances from the Lyran court officials awaiting his arrival. Jax noticed their stares, but responded with only a casual, lopsided grin that seemed to irritate them further. "Your biosignature readings are elevated," chirped a voice from the glowing bracelet on his wrist. "May I suggest regulating your breathing to project a more diplomatic presence?" "Relax, Kaiti," Jax murmured to his kinetic interface technician AI. "If they wanted diplomatic, Command wouldn't have sent me." "A decision I continue to find deeply puzzling," KIT replied with an almost human sigh. "Your file contains 17 reprimands for protocol violations, and your diplomatic experience consists of saving their royal asses from that border skirmish last month." Jax cut in. "Sometimes you need someone who shoots straight, figuratively and literally." Before KIT could respond, the massive crystal doors to the main hall swung open silently. A tall, willowy Lyran in elaborate ceremonial robes stepped forward, eyes downcast in ritual deference. The radiant court of her serenity, Princess Lumia, heir to the 7th resonance, awaits Captain Jax Riley of the Terran Alliance, the court herald announced, voice melodic but devoid of warmth. Jax squared his shoulders and marched forward, deliberately moderating his normally long strides to match the herald's measured pace. The Harmony Hall opened before him, a vast cathedral of living crystal that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Arranged in concentric semicircles were dozens of Lyrans in elaborate attire, their faces serene masks betraying no emotion. And at the center, seated upon a throne that appeared to be carved from a single massive gemstone, was Princess Lyranai Illumia. Even by Lyran standards, she was striking. Her skin held a subtle luminescence, as though lit from within, and her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and a deep violet, seemed to contain entire galaxies in their depths. Her elaborate ceremonial attire, layers of iridescent fabric interwoven with crystalline threads, only enhanced her otherworldly appearance. But it was her expression, or rather, the complete lack of one, that caught Jax's attention. She watched his approach with a gaze so cool and detached it made the court officials seem positively welcoming by comparison. "Captain Jax Riley," she said when he reached the appropriate distance before her throne. Her voice was melodic but measured, each syllable precisely weighted. "The Terran Alliance sends a soldier to address matters of diplomacy. This is unexpected." Jax gave a perfunctory bow, just deep enough to avoid causing offense, but nowhere near the prostration the court officials clearly expected. "Your Serenity, sometimes unexpected approaches yield unexpected results. The border incident demonstrated that our traditional channels of communication have room for improvement." A slight narrowing of Lyranai's eyes was the only indication that his bluntness had registered at all. Indeed, 3 Lyran vessels damaged and 1 Terran outpost compromised. A regrettable misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that could have been avoided with direct communication, Jax replied, ignoring KIT's warning vibration against his wrist. "The Terran Alliance values our relationship with Lyra 7 too much to risk further misunderstandings." A whisper of disapproval rippled through the court at his audacity. The princess, however, showed no reaction beyond a slight tilt of her head. "The Lyran sovereignty has maintained peace for 3 millennia through careful adherence to our traditions," she said. "We find that transparency is not always conducive to harmony. Jax couldn't suppress a short laugh. With respect, your serenity. In my experience, lack of transparency usually leads to people shooting at each other. The Alliance believes that honesty, even when uncomfortable, is the foundation of lasting peace. The princess regarded him for a long moment, her expression still unreadable. Then, to the evident shock of her court, she slowly rose from her throne and descended the 3 crystal steps to stand directly before Jax. Even with the added height of the steps, she had seemed tall. Now, standing before him, she was impressive, nearly matching his 6'2" frame. "You speak of transparency, Captain," she said, her voice now so quiet that only he could hear it clearly. "Of honesty. Of directness." "I do," Jax replied, meeting her gaze without flinching. Something shifted in those star-filled eyes. A calculation, a decision. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, carrying a note of challenge that silenced every whisper in the hall. "Soldier Riley, if you truly value transparency as you claim." Her gaze intensified, boring into him. "Take off your armor." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Kit seemed momentarily shocked into silence. Jax blinked, certain he had misheard. "I beg your pardon, your serenity?" "Your armor," she repeated, her voice unwavering. "Remove it. Now." From his wrist, Kit finally found its voice. "Captain, Protocol 335 B clearly states that Alliance personnel must maintain full protective equipment in unassessed foreign environments. Additionally, the symbolic implications of disarmament in this context are understood." Jax cut the AI off, his eyes never leaving the princess's face. Something told him this was a test, but not the kind Kit was analyzing. Not politics or protocol or posturing. Something more personal. The court watched in stunned silence as Jax made his decision. With deliberate movements, he reached for the release mechanisms on his shoulder guards, the first components of the complex Terran combat suit. "Captain, warn one last time. Log the protocol violation," Jax murmured. "Wouldn't want to mess up my perfect record." The shoulder pieces disengaged with a soft pneumatic hiss. He placed them carefully on the crystal floor beside him. Next came the arm bracers, then the chest plate, each component removed methodically and arranged neatly at his feet. As the layers of protection fell away, the Lyran court's whispers resumed, growing incrementally louder with each piece removed. The princess remained perfectly still, her eyes tracking his every movement with an intensity that belied her outward calm. When he removed the torso component, exposing the underarmor mesh beneath, Kit tried one final intervention. "Captain, I strongly advise." "Mute audio, Kit," Jax commanded softly, continuing his methodical disarmament. The leg pieces were the most complex, requiring him to temporarily shift his weight as he disengaged the locking mechanisms at thigh, knee, and ankle. Throughout it all, he maintained eye contact with the princess as much as possible, a silent acknowledgement of the unusual confrontation transpiring between them. Finally, the last piece, his armored boots, came away. Jax stood before the court of Lyra 7 in only the form-fitting underarmor mesh that Alliance soldiers wore beneath their combat suits. The mesh, designed for climate control and biometric monitoring, concealed nothing. And what it revealed left the entire court, Princess Lyranaya included, in shocked silence. The right side of Jax's body, from his shoulder down to his fingertips and from his hip to his foot, was not flesh but advanced cybernetic prosthetics. The technology was clearly military-grade, but not the shiny, pristine implants of high officials or wealthy civilians. These were battlefield replacements, functional rather than aesthetic, bearing the marks of multiple repairs and modifications. Where metal met flesh, a network of old scars told the story of traumatic injury and surgical intervention. His left eye, too, was an artificial implant, subtly different in color from his natural right eye, and surrounded by a starburst of scarring that extended to his temple. For the first time since his arrival, The princess's perfect composure cracked. Her eyes widened, her lips parted slightly, and the faintest gasp escaped her. She stared at him not with the disgust or horror he had grown accustomed to from those seeing his modifications for the first time, but with something far more complex, shock, certainly, but also intense curiosity and what might have been recognition. The court's reaction was less nuanced. Gasps of shock and whispered exclamations rippled through the assembly. Several officials made subtle gestures that Jax recognized as religious wards against impurity. Jax stood motionless, allowing their scrutiny, his expression carefully neutral despite the vulnerability of his position. He had followed her command to its conclusion, answering her challenge of transparency with complete exposure. After what felt like an eternity, Princess Lyranaya seemed to remember herself. With a quick, subtle gesture, she dismissed most of the court, keeping only a handful of what appeared to be her closest advisors and guards. "Captain Riley," she said when the hall had emptied of all but this inner circle. Her voice was different now, quieter, less formal, but no less intense. "I did not expect this." Jax allowed himself a small, sardonic smile. "Transparency, your serenity." As requested, KIT, she addressed his wrist device directly, surprising him. "You may resume audio functionality." "Audio systems online," KIT responded immediately, "and I must register my objection to—" "Enough, KIT," Jax interrupted. "What's done is done." "Indeed," the princess nodded. "Captain, you may dress, though perhaps not in full armor for now. I believe we have much to discuss." As Jax retrieved his under-uniform from a compartment in his discarded chest plate, deliberately leaving the armor itself on the floor, KIT sent a private vibration alert to his neural interface. "Captain," the AI's voice came through their secure channel. "During the disarmament process, I detected an unauthorized scanning signal directed at your cybernetic components. Origin point, somewhere within this chamber. Signature does not match known Lyran security protocols." Jax gave no outward sign of having received this information, but his mind raced as he pulled on the simple black uniform. Someone in this room, someone other than the princess and her official guards, had been very interested in getting a detailed look at his military-grade cybernetics. And that raised a host of troubling questions. Questions that would have to wait, as Princess Lyranaya was now gesturing for him to follow her through a side door, away from the formal audience chamber. "Come, Captain," she said, her voice carrying a new urgency. "Let us speak more freely." As Jax followed the princess into a smaller, more intimate chamber adorned with living crystal formations that pulsed with soft light, he couldn't shake the feeling that his mission had just become far more complicated than a simple diplomatic exercise. His instincts, the ones that had kept him alive through countless combat situations, were humming with alert tension. Princess Lyranaya dismissed all but one of her remaining attendants, a tall, severe-looking Lyran male whose ceremonial armor marked him as a high-ranking military officer. The man's posture was rigid with disapproval as he took a position near the door. "This is Commander Kalen, head of my royal guard," the princess explained, noticing Jax's attention. "His presence is non-negotiable." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Jax replied with a casual nod to the commander, who returned it with the barest inclination of his head. The princess settled onto a crystalline bench and gestured for Jax to take the one opposite her. The space between them was filled by a small table made of the same living crystal as the benches, its surface occasionally rippling like water. "I must admit, Captain," she began after a moment of silence, "my request was impulsive. Unlike me, I am not typically one to defy protocol." "So I gathered," Jax replied. "May I ask what prompted it?" Her eyes, those star-filled violet depths, studied him intently. "Your words about transparency resonated with certain concerns I've been harboring. I wish to see if you truly embodied the principles you claim to represent." She paused. "Few would have complied. Few would have dared to ask," Jax countered with a small smile. Indeed, for the first time, something almost like a smile touched her lips before quickly disappearing. Your cybernetic modifications. They are extensive. Battle injuries? Jax nodded, unconsciously flexing his mechanical hand. Kepler, 9 campaign. My transport took a direct hit from insurgent artillery. I was the only survivor, and barely that. He kept his tone matter-of-fact, devoid of self-pity. Alliance medical technology is impressive when they're motivated to save an investment. You speak of yourself as a resource rather than a person, she observed. Jack shrugged. In war, that's what soldiers are. I'm just more obviously manufactured than most. Instead of responding immediately, the princess extended a hand toward his cybernetic arm, stopping just short of touching it. May I? The request surprised him, but after a brief hesitation, he extended his mechanical arm, palm up, across the small table. Her fingers were cool and light as they traced the complex articulation of his metal wrist and palm. Her touch was clinical at first, then increasingly curious as she explored the junction where metal met flesh. Our people view such modifications as problematic, she said quietly, a disruption of the natural harmony between body and spirit. Yet I sense no such disruption in you. KIT would disagree with you there, Jack said with a short laugh. According to my last psych evaluation, I have unresolved identity integration issues and compensatory behavioral patterns. Captain KIT, cut in. May I remind you that psychological assessments are classified. Mute audio, Jack said again, earning what might have been a flicker of amusement from the princess. Your AI is very protective, she observed. KIT takes its job seriously, Jax agreed. Then, making a decision, he lowered his voice. Seriously enough to detect an unauthorized scan of my cybernetics during our little demonstration back there. Her hand froze on his arm, and her eyes snapped to his. Explain. Someone in that room was very interested in the details of my Alliance-grade cybernetic systems, and they weren't using official channels to look. The princess withdrew her hand sharply, her momentary openness replaced by guarded concern. She exchanged a glance with Commander Kalen, who stepped forward immediately. This is a serious accusation, the commander said, his deep voice resonant in the small chamber. Our security protocols are impenetrable. No security is impenetrable, Jax replied evenly. And I'm not accusing anyone, just stating a fact. Detected the scan and KIT doesn't make those kinds of mistakes. Allow KIT to elaborate, the princess instructed. Jax nodded. Resume audio, KIT. The princess would like details about the scan you detected. Certainly, the AI responded. At precisely 14 hours, 27 minutes, and 3 seconds local time, during the removal of Captain Riley's thoracic armor plate, I detected a focused electromagnetic scan operating on a frequency of 382.5 MHz with modulated pulses consistent with deep structural analysis. The scan specifically targeted the neural interface junctions of the captain's cybernetic components. The signal originated from within the Harmony Hall, but utilized an unusual encryption pattern not consistent with standard Lyran security protocols. Kalen's already rigid posture somehow became even more tense. That is concerning. Indeed, the princess said quietly. Her eyes returned to Jax. Captain, I must ask a significant favor. Would you and KIT be willing to assist Commander Kalen in investigating this security breach? Discreetly, of course. Discreetly may be difficult, Jax pointed out, gesturing to himself. I'm not exactly inconspicuous around here. Nevertheless, she insisted, this is not the first irregularity we have experienced recently, but it is perhaps the most concerning, particularly in light of the border incident that brought you here. Jax considered for a moment, then nodded. I'll help, but I'll need access to your security systems, at least partially. Commander Kalen began to object, but the princess raised a hand to silence him. Granted, under Kalen's supervision. And, Captain, her eyes locked with his, this arrangement remains between us for now. The court must not know. Understood, Jax agreed. He had a feeling he was being pulled into something far more complex than a diplomatic mission, but his curiosity, and something else he couldn't quite name when he looked at the princess, pushed him forward. "When do we start?" "Immediately," she replied, rising gracefully. "Time, I fear, is not our ally." Commander Kalen looked as though he had swallowed something unpleasant, but he gave a stiff nod of acquiescence to his princess's command. "I will escort Captain Riley to the security nexus." Under the pretense of a detailed tour of our defensive capabilities, the princess supplied smoothly, a natural courtesy to extend to a visiting Alliance military officer. As they prepared to leave, the princess addressed Jax once more. "Captain, I must ask, why did you really comply with my request to remove your armor? You must have known it violated your protocols." Jax considered the question seriously before answering. "Sometimes you have to risk exposure to break an impasse." He met her gaze directly. "And sometimes you need to see what's beneath the armor to understand what you're really dealing with." Something flickered in her eyes, recognition, perhaps, or appreciation. "Indeed, Captain. Indeed." The security nexus of the Lyran Royal Palace was a paradox, a blend of advanced technology and ancient mysticism that Jax found both fascinating and frustrating. Crystalline interfaces pulsed with light in patterns that seemed to follow some logic beyond standard computing, while Lyran technicians moved through the space with the reverence of priests in a temple. Commander Kalen maintained a rigid silence as he led Jax to a somewhat isolated workstation. "You may access basic system parameters from here," he said stiffly, "under my direct supervision." "KIT, you're up," Jax said, extending his wrist over the crystal interface. The AI's bracelet emitted a soft pulse of light that harmonized with the crystal's natural glow. "Establishing compatible profiles, key." Announced. Lyran security architecture is unusual, less binary, and more wave-based. "Fascinating. Can you track the origin of that scan?" Jax asked, keeping his voice low. "Working," KIT replied. "Commander, would you permit a broader access spectrum? It would expedite the process significantly." Kalen hesitated, then made a subtle adjustment to the crystal interface. "Limited expansion only. Do not attempt to breach the inner resonance layers." "Compliance assured," KIT confirmed. After several moments of silent processing, the AI spoke again. "Captain, I am detecting multiple scanning events similar to the one that targeted your cybernetics. They appear to have been occurring at irregular intervals for approximately 27 local days." "Show me," Kalen demanded, his aloof demeanor cracking to reveal genuine concern. A three-dimensional projection materialized above the crystal interface, showing the palace complex with pinpoints of light indicating scan origins and targets. The pattern was scattered but showed clear concentration around the resonance core, apparently the central hub of Lyran's spiritual technology, and several high-ranking officials' quarters. "This is impossible," Kalen muttered. "Our systems would have detected such intrusions. Not if they were specifically designed to harmonize with your security resonance," Jax pointed out. "Like playing a note so close to your system's frequency that it registers as part of the natural background." Kalen's eyes narrowed. "You seem remarkably well-versed in counter-security measures, Captain." "Special Forces training," Jax replied with a shrug. "Know your enemy's capabilities so you can protect your own systems." Before Kalen could respond, KIT interrupted. "Captain, I've isolated a pattern. The scans are not random. They appear to be methodically mapping the resonance core's operational parameters and the neural patterns of those with access to it. Someone's planning to breach the core," Jax concluded. "Who has access to it besides the princess?" "That information is classified," Kalen began, but then seemed to reconsider. "However, given the circumstances, access is limited to the royal family, the High Spiritual Council, and the core guardians, a specialized security detail separate from my royal guard. Any unusual personnel changes in those groups recently?" Kalen's expression darkened. "Elder Paxentella joined the High Council 3 months ago, after his predecessor's unexpected passing. He was not the traditional choice, but he had influential supporters, and he has access to the core." Limited, but yes. Kalen's posture had shifted subtly from confrontational to collaborative as the evidence mounted. He has been advocating for stricter isolation from off-world influences, particularly regarding cybernetic technology, which he considers spiritually corrupting. Sounds like someone I'd love at a dinner party, Jax remarked dryly. KIT, can you correlate Elder Paxantella's movements with these scanning events? After a brief analysis, KIT displayed a new pattern overlay. There is a 73% correlation between the Elder's presence in the palace and scanning activities. However, the scans originate from multiple locations, often simultaneously. He's not working alone, Jax concluded. The purity resonance, Kalen said quietly, almost to himself. When Jax raised a questioning eyebrow, the commander explained reluctantly. An ancient Lyran philosophical faction that believes our spiritual technology must remain untainted by outside influence. They were thought to be merely theoretical purists, academic objectors, not active subversives. Theoretical until someone gave them a practical application, Jack suggested. Any significant events coming up involving the resonance core? Kalen stiffened. The harmonic alignment ceremony. In 2 days. It's when the resonance core is recalibrated to maintain perfect harmony with Lyra VII's spiritual fields. The princess will lead the ritual, supported by the High Council. That will be the perfect time to seize control of the core, Jax said, especially if you had inside help from a council member and had mapped both the technical specifications and the neural patterns of the authorized users. Kalen's features hardened with resolve. We must inform the princess immediately. As they hurriedly left the security nexus, neither noticed the subtle shift in one of the crystal displays, nor the silent alarm that triggered in a distant part of the palace. Princess Lyranaya received their report in a small, private meditation chamber adjacent to her personal quarters. As Kalen relayed their findings, her serene composure never wavered, but Jax noticed her hands tightening incrementally around a small crystal she held. The evidence is concerning but not conclusive, she said when Kalen finished. Elder Paxantella is respected, whatever his personal views on isolation. To accuse a High Council member of treason would require absolute certainty. With respect, your serenity, Jax interjected, waiting for absolute certainty often means waiting until it's too late. The pattern is clear enough for precautionary measures, at least. The princess's gaze shifted to him, those star-filled eyes assessing. What would you suggest, Captain? Canceling the harmonic alignment would cause widespread spiritual disruption across our planet. Not cancellation, Jax clarified. A security enhancement. Make it known that due to the recent border tensions, you've requested alliance assistance in safeguarding the ceremony. That gives us legitimate reason to be present and alert without tipping off Paxantella that he suspected. An unorthodox suggestion, Kalen said, frowning. The presence of outsiders at the alignment is unprecedented. So there's a potential coup, Jax countered. Sometimes unprecedented threats require unprecedented responses. The princess considered this, her fingers still working the small crystal. The suggestion has merit, though it will cause considerable consternation among the traditionalists. However, she fixed Jax with an intent look. Your cybernetic components pose a complication. Our more conservative elements, including much of the High Council, view such modifications as spiritually disruptive. Your presence near the resonance core during the alignment might be seen as provocative, or the perfect distraction, Jax suggested. Everyone watching the obvious outsider while KIT monitors for the real threat. A subtle smile touched the princess's lips. Tactical thinking. I can appreciate that. She turned to Kalen. Make the arrangements. Inform the council that I have invited Captain Riley to observe the ceremony as a gesture of transparency between our peoples. Their reactions may prove informative. As you command, Kalen acknowledged, though his expression suggested he still had reservations. After the commander departed to implement their plan, the princess rose and moved to a small alcove, returning with a carafe of luminescent blue liquid and 2 crystal glasses. Starlight nectar, she explained, pouring a small amount into each glass. A traditional offering between potential allies. Jax accepted the glass cautiously. KIT, analysis? Non-toxic to human physiology, the AI confirmed after a quick scan. Though it may produce mild euphoric effects due to its natural resonant properties. Just what every good alliance needs, Jax remarked with a small smile, raising the glass in a toast. To unprecedented responses. To seeing beneath armor, the princess countered, touching her glass to his. The liquid seemed to shimmer down Jax's throat, leaving a pleasant warmth that spread through his chest. For a moment, he thought he could feel a subtle resonance between his cybernetic components and his organic tissue, a harmonizing of the divide he usually felt so acutely. You're the first Lyran I've met who doesn't seem disturbed by my modifications, he observed. The princess's gaze lowered briefly to her own hands. Perhaps I understand more than most the experience of being caught between worlds. Before Jax could ask what she meant, KIT interrupted. Captain, I'm detecting an approaching group. Multiple biosignatures, moving purposefully in this direction. The princess tensed. The royal guard would have announced themselves. Looks like our timeline just accelerated, Jax said, setting down his glass and reaching instinctively for weapons he wasn't carrying. KIT, defensive options? Limited without your armor, Captain, the AI replied. Cybernetic strength enhancement is operational, but without protective plating, you risk system damage. The approaching footsteps grew louder. The princess moved swiftly to a wall panel and pressed a hidden mechanism. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage. This leads to the resonance core chamber, she explained quickly. We can secure ourselves there until Commander Kalen responds to the alarm I just triggered. They slipped into the passage just as the door to the meditation chamber burst open. Through the narrowing gap, Jax caught a glimpse of figures in hooded ceremonial robes, led by an elderly Lyran whose elaborate headdress marked him as a high council member. Elder Paxentella, I presume, Jax muttered as the hidden door sealed shut behind them. Yes, the princess confirmed, leading the way down the dimly lit passage. And if he's moving this openly against me, then he must believe his plan is already succeeding. The harmonic alignment isn't for another 2 days. Unless that was misinformation, Jax suggested. A security measure? She glanced back at him, a new respect in her eyes. Yes, the true time is known only to the royal family and the High Council. It's tonight, at the convergence of our moons, 3 hours from now. The passage opened into a vast, spherical chamber dominated by a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with inner light. The resonance core resembled a geometric heart, its facets reflecting and amplifying the energy that flowed through it in mesmerizing patterns. Around its base, a circle of smaller crystals hummed with harmonic frequencies that Jax could feel resonating in his cybernetic components. KIT, status report, he requested, keeping his voice low in the reverent space. Communication channels are being actively jammed, the AI responded. I cannot reach Commander Kalen or access external systems. However, I am detecting multiple approaching signals. They appear to be converging on this chamber from several access points. The princess moved swiftly to the core's main control interface, a crystalline console that responded to her touch with brightening luminescence. I can initiate emergency lockdown protocols, but it will require continuous authentication from a royal family member. I won't be able to fight and maintain the lockdown simultaneously. Leave the fighting to me, Jax said, taking up a position between her and the nearest entrance. Just keep that thing out of their hands. You're unarmed, she pointed out. Jax flexed his cybernetic arm, the servos whirring softly. Not entirely. The first attackers arrived moments later, a group of robed figures wielding ceremonial staffs that crackled with energy. They hesitated briefly upon seeing Jax standing guard, clearly not having expected resistance at this stage. The outsider protects the core, one called out. The abomination stands between us and purification. Abomination's got a nice ring to it, Jax muttered. Think I'll put that on my next set of dog tags. The attackers advanced cautiously, spreading out to surround him. Jax remained centered, balancing on the balls of his feet, cybernetic systems already calculating optimal response patterns. KIT, combat assistance, he subvocalized. Enhancement protocols engaged, the AI confirmed. Cybernetic response times accelerated. Warning: without armor, physical impact tolerance is significantly reduced. The first attacker lunged with his staff. Jax sidestepped, grabbing the staff with his cybernetic hand and using the attacker's momentum to throw him into two others. The staff came free in his grip, giving him a weapon. Much better, he grinned, spinning the staff experimentally. The energy field at its tip responded to his motion, leaving a trail of light in its wake. The next wave came more cautiously, attacking in coordinated pairs. Jax met them with brutal efficiency, his combat-enhanced reflexes letting him anticipate and counter their ritualized fighting style. What the Lyran extremists had in spiritual fervor, they lacked in practical combat experience against a special forces veteran. But they had numbers, and Jax had no armor. A glancing blow from an energy staff sent painful feedback surging through his cybernetic leg. Another caught him across the ribs on his organic side, leaving him momentarily breathless. Captain, system integrity at 82% and declining, KIT. Warned. Recommend strategic withdrawal. No withdrawal. Jax grunted, fending off another attack. Princess, how's that lockdown coming? Maintaining, she called back, her voice strained with concentration. But Pax Antella will have countermeasures. These are merely the first wave. As if summoned by her words, a new figure appeared at the chamber's main entrance. Elder Pax Antella stood framed in the doorway, his elaborate robes shimmering with embedded crystals that pulsed in an unsettling, dissonant rhythm. Princess Lyranaya, he called, his voice carrying a harmonic resonance that made Jax's cybernetic components vibrate uncomfortably. You disappoint me. Consorting with this fractured being, betraying our sacred isolation. The only betrayal here is yours, Elder, the princess replied, never taking her hands from the control interface. The purity resonance died out centuries ago, for good reason. Their fanaticism nearly destroyed our world once before. Their vision was pure, Pax Antella countered. Our ancestors lacked the courage to complete the purification. We will not fail as they did. He raised his hands, and the crystals in his robes flared brighter. The harmonic alignment will proceed as planned, but it will attune the core to our frequencies, not the corrupt harmonies of a princess who welcomes abominations to our sacred spaces. From his robes, he withdrew a crystalline device that pulsed with the same dissonant energy. This contains the compiled neural patterns of every authorized core user, extracted over weeks of careful scanning, including yours, Princess. With it, we can override your lockdown and initiate the true purification. Jax, still fending off the remaining attackers, felt his cybernetic systems responding strangely to the dissonant frequencies emanating from Pax Antella's device. Each pulse sent waves of interference through his neural interfaces, creating momentary lags in response time. KIT, what's happening? He managed between parries. The device is generating harmonic interference specifically calibrated to disrupt cybernetic neural interfaces, the AI responded. It appears they learn more from scanning you than we anticipated. System integrity now at 67% and declining rapidly. Pax Antella smiled coldly as he observed Jax's struggling movements. See how the abomination falters? The discord of metal and flesh cannot withstand the purity of true resonance. The princess's eyes darted between Jax and the elder. Captain, fall back. You cannot fight while he's targeting your systems. Giving up isn't really my style, Jax grunted, forcing his increasingly unresponsive cybernetic leg to support his weight as he knocked another attacker unconscious. Pax Antella approached the core, his followers creating a protective circle around him. Your Alliance soldier cannot save you, Princess. Nothing can stop the purification now. As the Elder raised his device, toward the core, Jax had a sudden realization. The dissonant frequency that was disrupting his cybernetics was having an effect precisely because it was out of harmony with the core's natural resonance. If that dissonance could be amplified, KIT, he subvocalized, can you reverse the polarity of my cybernetic response? Instead of fighting the interference, amplify it and redirect it. That would potentially cause catastrophic system failure, KIT warned. Your neural interfaces could be permanently damaged. But it would create a massive counterfrequency, right? Theoretically, yes. A significant electromagnetic pulse tuned to the inverse of the core's resonance. Do it, Jax decided. Full power. Captain, the risk. Now, KIT. The princess, still maintaining the lockdown at the control interface, sensed what Jax was planning. Captain, stop. The feedback could kill you. But Jax was already moving, pushing through the pain and system errors to charge directly at Pax Antella. The Elder raised his hand, intensifying the dissonant frequency, expecting Jax to collapse as his cybernetics failed. Instead, Jax embraced the failure. With KIT's reluctant assistance, his cybernetic systems began to amplify the disruptive frequency rather than resist it, building it to impossible levels within his own body. Pain lanced through every neural junction as organic and mechanical systems overloaded. System integrity critical, KIT warned. Neural interface damage imminent. Jax reached Pax Antella just as the Elder was about to interface his device with the core. With his remaining strength, he grabbed the Elder with his cybernetic hand, completing the circuit between himself, the device, and the Elder. Let me show you some real dissonance. Jax snarled through gritted teeth. Captain, the princess cried out, abandoning the control interface and rushing toward them. The world exploded in light and sound. Released the built-up energy in a massive pulse that interfaced with Pax Antella's device, creating a catastrophic resonance cascade. The pulse knocked everyone in the chamber off their feet and sent feedback surging through the resonance core itself. When the light faded, Jax lay motionless on the chamber floor, his cybernetic systems dark and unresponsive. Pax Antella was unconscious beside him, the crystalline device shattered into fragments. The core pulsed erratically, its harmonies destabilized but intact. The princess reached Jax first, kneeling beside him. Captain? Jax. Her hands hovered over him, uncertain where to touch amid the mix of unresponsive cybernetics and all-too vulnerable flesh. KIT, she tried, but the AI bracelet was as dark as Jax's other systems. At that moment, Commander Kalen burst into the chamber with a squad of royal guards, weapons ready. They quickly secured the unconscious cultists while Kalen rushed to the princess's side. Your Serenity, are you injured? I am unharmed, she replied, not taking her eyes from Jax's still form. But Captain Riley, he sacrificed his systems to prevent Pax Antella from corrupting the core. Kalen knelt opposite her, checking for life signs. He lives, but barely. His organic systems are in shock, and his cybernetics appear completely offline. We must get him to the healing chambers immediately, the princess ordered. And bring his armor, KIT. May have backup protocols stored there. As the royal guards carefully lifted Jax onto a hovering stretcher, the princess placed her hand on his chest, feeling the faint, irregular heartbeat beneath her palm. Hold on, soldier, she whispered. That's an order. The next 3 days passed in a blur of emergency procedures and delicate negotiations. While Lyran healers worked to stabilize Jax's organic systems, their technological specialists collaborated with Alliance engineers, summoned via emergency protocols in Jax's armor, to repair his cybernetic components. The damage was extensive, requiring multiple procedures and careful calibration. Princess Lyranaya personally oversaw the process, spending hours in the healing chambers despite the pressing demands of the political crisis unleashed by Pax Antella's failed coup. The Elder and his co-conspirators were in custody, and evidence of their plot had been presented to the full High Council, many of whom were shocked by the extremism of the Purity Resonance's modern incarnation. On the fourth day, as the twin suns of Lyra 7 were setting, Jax finally regained consciousness. He awoke to find himself in an unfamiliar chamber, walls of living crystal pulsing gently with soothing light. His body felt simultaneously weightless and leaden, and there was an odd emptiness where the constant background hum of his cybernetic systems should have been. There, in final calibration mode, came a familiar voice from his right. Turning his head with effort, Jax found Princess Lyranias seated beside his healing platform, her formal regalia replaced by simpler attire that somehow made her seem more, rather than less, regal. "Your cybernetic systems," she clarified, noting his confusion. "They are functional, but running in minimal power mode while the neural interfaces heal. Your AI companion was quite insistent about the proper protocols." Made it through. Jax's voice was rough from disuse. Indeed, the princess smiled, though it was quite vocal about your reckless disregard for system preservation protocols. I believe those were its exact words. Jax attempted a smile, wincing as it pulled a healing tissue on his face. "Sounds about right. The core. Secure. Your disruption pulse prevented Paxantella's device from completing its interface. There was some temporary destabilization, but our technicians have restored proper harmonic balance. And the Elder? In custody, along with his inner circle. The investigation continues, but it appears the modern purity resonants have been building support quietly for years, exploiting fears about outside influence weakening our traditional ways." She paused, her expression turning thoughtful. They were not entirely wrong about the risks of change, but their methods. "Extremism rarely leads to harmony," Jax observed. Indeed, she studied him for a moment. "What you did was unexpected and costly." Her eyes moved to his cybernetic arm, where Lyran crystal technology had been integrated with Alliance components in the repair process, creating an unusual hybrid aesthetic. "We had limited access to Alliance replacement parts," she explained, following his gaze. "Our technicians used compatible Lyran crystalline circuits to bridge the gaps. I hope the modifications are not unwelcome." Jax carefully flexed the fingers of his cybernetic hand, watching as subtle pulses of light followed the movement through the crystalline components. "It's different, but I've always been a patchwork." He met her eyes. "One more piece of the puzzle doesn't change the picture much." "I disagree," she said quietly. "Sometimes a single piece can transform the entire image." She hesitated, then continued. "The High Council has reviewed the events surrounding Paxantella's attempted coup. They have acknowledged that without your intervention, the consequences would have been catastrophic. Traditional Lyran isolation has been reconsidered in light of these events. Political fallout not quite what the Elder expected." "Quite the opposite of his intentions," she confirmed with a small smile. "The Council has authorized the establishment of a permanent Alliance liaison position here on Lyra 7. Someone to facilitate greater understanding between our peoples while still respecting our traditions." "Sounds like a job for a real diplomat," Jax remarked. "Not a soldier with more mettle than manners." "On the contrary," the princess countered. "The Council specifically requested someone with demonstrated understanding of both the technical and cultural complexities involved. Someone who has proven their commitment to transparency and mutual protection." Her eyes held his. "They requested you, Captain Riley." Jax blinked in surprise. "Me? I'm not exactly ambassador material." "Perhaps traditional ambassadors are not what this moment requires," she suggested. "Perhaps what we need is someone willing to remove their armor when the situation demands it." Before Jax could respond, the chamber door opened to admit Commander Kalen, who now regarded Jax with something approaching respect. "Your Serenity, the Alliance representatives have arrived for the preliminary discussions," he announced. "And Captain, your commanding officer wishes to speak with you when you are able." "Thank you, Commander," the princess acknowledged. "Please inform them we will join shortly." As Kalen departed, she turned back to Jax. "Your superiors were quite concerned. It seems you are considered a valuable asset. More likely they're worried about the paperwork involved in losing expensive cybernetic equipment." Jax joked, though the humor didn't quite reach his eyes. The princess studied him for a moment, then reached out and placed her hand lightly over his, organic fingers against synthetic. Before we join the others, I wish to say something to you privately. Her voice took on a formal quality, though her touch remained personal. As heir to the seventh resonance, I extend my deepest gratitude for your service to Lyra 7. Just doing my job, Jax replied automatically. No, she corrected gently. You went far beyond duty. You risked permanent destruction to save people who had shown you nothing but suspicion and disdain. That is not duty, Captain. That is something else entirely. Her fingers tightened slightly around his. In our traditions, when one royal house owes a life debt to another, it is commemorated with a shared resonance, a harmonic connection that transcends mere alliance. I'm hardly royalty, Jax pointed out. Perhaps not by birth, she acknowledged, but by action, by sacrifice. Those are the true measures of nobility on any world worth its name. She withdrew her hand and stood, her bearing once again that of the royal heir. When you are ready, Captain Riley, we have much to discuss about the future of our worlds. As she moved toward the door, Jax called after her. Princess. When she turned, he asked the question that had been nagging at him since their first meeting. That day in the Harmony Hall, why did you really ask me to take off my armor? For the first time, he saw genuine uncertainty cross her features. I cannot fully explain it. It was an impulse, as I said before. Uncharacteristic. She paused, considering. Perhaps some resonances exist before we are conscious of them. Perhaps I somehow knew that what lay beneath your armor was exactly what our world needed to see. With that enigmatic statement, she departed, leaving Jax to contemplate the strange path that had led him here and the even stranger one that lay ahead. System diagnostics complete. KIT's familiar voice suddenly announced from the newly repaired bracelet on his wrist. Neural interface synchronization at 89% and improving. Crystal integration performing above projected parameters. You'll be interested to know that the Lyran crystal components actually enhance processing efficiency by 12.3% while reducing power consumption by. KIT, Jax interrupted, a genuine smile spreading across his face. It's good to have you back. Likewise, Captain, the AI replied, its tone softening slightly. Though I must register my strongest possible objection to your recent tactical decisions. Noted, Jax acknowledged, carefully sitting up on the healing platform. His body, both organic and mechanical parts, protested the movement, but he pushed through the discomfort. How about helping me get on my feet instead? Apparently, we've got a new mission. May I remind you that medical protocols suggest at least another 24 hours of recovery before. KIT, Jax said firmly, when have I ever followed protocol? After a moment's silence, the AI replied with what almost sounded like resignation tinged with affection. Never, Captain. Not once in our entire operational history. And look how well it's turned out. Jax grinned, gesturing to his newly integrated cybernetics, the healing chamber, and the window beyond which the crystal spires of the Lyran capital glowed in the twilight. I'd say we're right where we need to be. Over the following weeks, as Jax recovered his strength and adjusted to his hybrid cybernetic systems, the landscape of Lyran Alliance relations transformed dramatically. The failed coup had shaken Lyran society's confidence in its traditional isolation, creating an unprecedented openness to controlled cultural exchange. Jax found himself at the center of these changes, his unique position as both Alliance soldier and Lyran hero giving his words weight in both worlds. Commander Kalen, initially the most skeptical of Jax's presence, became an unexpected ally. The shared experience of combating Pax Antella's conspiracy had forged a warrior's respect between them, transcending their different backgrounds. Your fighting style lacks refinement, Kalen observed during one of their now regular training sessions in the Royal Guard practice chambers. But it possesses a pragmatic efficiency I had not previously appreciated. High praise coming from you, Jax replied, adjusting the crystalline components of his cybernetic arm after a particularly demanding sequence of movements. Next, you'll be admitting I'm not an abomination after all. Kalen's expression remained serious. That term reflects an outdated understanding of harmony. True resonance comes not from purity, but from complementary difference, a lesson our society is now relearning, thanks in no small part to you. Beyond the palace walls, Lyran society was engaged in spirited debate about their future relationship with the wider galaxy. The traditionalists still advocated caution, but their voices were now balanced by those who saw the benefits of selective engagement. Pax Antella's extremism had discredited the most isolationist positions, creating space for moderate voices to emerge. Throughout it all, Princess Lyranaya navigated the political currents with growing confidence. Jax observed her transformation from the distant, ceremonial figure he'd first met to a decisive leader who balanced tradition with pragmatism. Their working relationship evolved into something neither could precisely define. More than diplomatic counterparts, but constrained by their respective positions and responsibilities. 6 months after the confrontation at the Resonance Core, the princess summoned Jax to a private meeting in the palace gardens, a rare space of natural beauty amid the crystalline architecture. She was waiting for him beside a small pool where luminescent aquatic creatures traced patterns beneath the surface. "Captain," she greeted him, the formality of her address belied by the warmth in her eyes. "Thank you for coming." "Your summons sounded urgent," Jax replied, noting the absence of her usual attendance. "Is everything all right?" "Yes and no," she said, gesturing for him to join her on a bench overlooking the pool. "Our new treaty with the Alliance will be finalized next week. The last details have been resolved. That's good news, isn't it? Months of work finally coming to fruition." "It is," she agreed, "but it also marks a transition point. Your assignment as temporary liaison will conclude with the treaty signing. The Alliance has already named your replacement, a career diplomat with extensive cross-cultural experience." Jax absorbed this information, surprised by the hollow feeling it created. "Well, that makes sense. Crisis averted. Time to send to the professionals. I've been expecting it." "Have you?" she asked, studying his expression. "And what will you do? Return to active military service?" Jack shrugged, the movement setting off subtle pulses of light through his crystalline cybernetic components. "That's the plan. Command has been patient with my extended assignment here, but they've made it clear they want their special forces captain back." "I see." The princess was silent for a moment, her gaze dropping to the luminescent creatures in the pool. "And is that what you want?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you want?" 6 months ago, the answer would have been simple: complete the mission, return to duty, move on to the next assignment. But now, "I'm not sure," he admitted finally. "This place, these people," he stopped himself before adding, "it's become more than just an assignment." "Then perhaps you should consider an alternative," she suggested, her voice carefully neutral. "The High Council has authorized the creation of a new position, military advisor to the royal court. Someone to oversee the integration of Alliance security protocols with our own, to train a new generation of royal guards in combined techniques, to serve as a bridge between our worlds." Jack stared at her, understanding dawning. "You're offering me a permanent position here." "I am," she confirmed, finally meeting his eyes directly. "If you wish to accept it." "What about the Alliance?" "I'm still technically under their command." "Already addressed," she replied with a hint of satisfaction. "A special diplomatic exchange provision in the new treaty. The Alliance keeps their liaison. We gain a military advisor. Everyone maintains face." Jax shook his head in amazement. "You've thought of everything." "Not everything," she admitted softly. "I cannot predict your answer." The vulnerability in her voice struck him more powerfully than any formal request could have. In that moment, he saw beyond the princess to the woman, someone who, like him, was caught between worlds and responsibilities, navigating a path no one had walked before. "The position would report directly to the royal court?" he asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear it. "To me," she clarified. "You would work with Commander Kalen on implementation, but strategic decisions would be ours to make. Together." The word hung between them, laden with meanings neither was yet ready to fully articulate. "Then I accept," Jack said simply. Though KIT will probably have a system malfunction when I tell it we're staying permanently. Her face lit with genuine joy, a rare public display of emotion that she quickly tempered, though the warmth remained in her eyes. Your AI will adapt, as we all must. Speaking of adaptation, Jax said, gesturing to his cybernetic arm with its integrated Lyran crystals, the medical team says these modifications are now permanent. The crystal integration has become too complete to separate from the Alliance components. Does that trouble you? She asked, her eyes searching his. It did at first, he admitted, but I've come to see it differently. These components, he flexed his cybernetic hand, watching the light flow through the crystalline pathways. They're not Terran or Lyran anymore. There's something new, something better. As are we all, perhaps, she suggested. Our isolation protected us for millennia, but it also limited us. Real strength comes not from purity, but from integration. The harmony of different notes creating a richer resonance. Jack smiled at her philosophical framing. A soldier would just call it having the right tool for the job. And sometimes, she replied, returning his smile, the right tool is one that no one expected, a soldier willing to remove his armor when asked by an impulsive princess. The best decisions I've made usually start with terrible ideas, Jax quipped. Then, more seriously, I never did thank you for that, did I? For seeing something worth trusting beneath all that metal and protocol. No thanks are needed between allies, she said formally. Then, in a softer voice, she added, or between friends. As the twin suns of Lyra 7 dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in a gentle twilight, Jax realized that his life had irrevocably changed course that day in the Harmony Hall. What had begun as a diplomatic mission had become something far more meaningful. A new purpose, a new home, perhaps even a new beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them not as princess and soldier, not as Lyran and Terran, but as two individuals who had seen beneath each other's protective armor and found something worth preserving. A resonance that transcended the boundaries of worlds. To new beginnings, he said quietly. To harmony found in unexpected places, she answered, her hand coming to rest lightly beside his on the bench between them. Not quite touching, but close enough to feel the subtle resonance that had drawn them together from start.